Hi, this is Edward Troxel, and in today's video we're going to continue expanding on our last tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to render every sequence that we have open. So this way, if you have multiple sequences that make up one project, you can render them all at once. So far in our project we have added these radio buttons, the entire project, the work area, the in-out area, and the marker regions to choose which type of render we want to do. To add a new render type, we need to add another radio button. So let's paste in the code here. And you will see that we've added a new radio button here, and we're going to ID this one as sequences. The name is still render, and we're changing the value on this one. We're just using the next number, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 now. Our label for our sequences is going to be all sequences, and we're going to set this one up so that it will render every sequence in the project. Now that we have the button defined, we have to pass the information to our script, so we need to go back up to the top and add some more information up here. First, let's add our variable for our sequence flag. So we'll come in here, and now we have our sequence flag, and it's going to be document.getElementById, and this one, our ID was sequences for this one. And then we need to check down here to see if it was checked. So let's come down here and add our next check, and then if the sequence flag is checked, then we're going to send the render type is the sequence flag value, which in this case is number 5. Now that we've got the new item listed on the HTML page and we're passing the information to extend script, let's go over to extend script and add the new option there. In extend script, we have our various types listed here as 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to add a 5th one in here at the end. So let's go ahead and add render type number 5. And up here we had render regions. This time we're going to call this one render sequences, and we're going to pass the same information to it that we passed our render regions. Now that we've defined what it's supposed to call, let's put the routine down here where we have our regions down here. Now we need a new function for our sequences. So this will be our new routine to render the sequences. We passed it the preset, the output folder, the file name, and the file extension. First thing I'm going to do is set my job ID equal to null. That will tell me whether or not I actually created any renders on this particular one. Then I'm going to get the list of sequences that are in this project. So the sequence list will contain all of the sequences. Then we're going to look at the number of sequences we have. So if we have some sequences, now we're going to go through all of the sequences. So we're going to start at 0, since the first sequence is number 0, and we're going to go through all of the sequences until we have seen every sequence in the project. So now let's get the current sequence, which will be, in this case, the 8th sequence. And then we're going to create our file name once again. In this case, I'm putting the output folder and the separator the same as we've done on all of the previous ones. And then for this one, I am going to get the sequence name and put it on there. And then after the sequence name, let's add a space here, and then we're going to include the file name that was entered on the HTML page, and then of course the file extension comes from the preset that we chose. Now all we have to do is do the render. So we pass the job over to Media Encoder, and in this particular case we're doing the current sequence, which is the 8th sequence that we're looking at. So we're not looking at the active sequence anymore, we're looking at the current sequence. We pass it the file name, the preset, and then we're doing an app.encoder.encode entire, because we want it to encode the entire sequence. Then it will continue through this loop until it has gone through every one of the sequences. When it is finished, if it has done an encode, then it will tell us that some jobs were sent to Media Encoder and that the last job was job ID. So now let's save this and copy it over to Premiere so that we can test run it. Here in Premiere, I've created me 3 bins, an S1, an S2, and an S3. In S1, I've got a sequence called render1, and it has a single picture on it. In S2, I have a sequence named sequence 02. I didn't rename that one, and it has this image on it. Then I have in bin S3, I had named this one test sequence 3, and it has this picture on it, and you can see that my 3 sequences are listed here as well. So now let's test it out by going to Windows, Extensions, we run our render script. We'll come up here and we'll select a render preset. Let's select a destination folder. I'm going to give it a file name, and let's call this let's call this all sequences. And then I'm going to check all sequences down here, and we click on render. Now it tells us our jobs were sent to the media encoder. Let's go over to media encoder, and we can see that these are the jobs that were sent over here. Notice the first one begins with test sequence 3. The next one begins with sequence 02. The next one begins with render 1. They all 3 have the word all sequences in them, and they're all going to the correct folder. As you can see, we have discussed many different ways of rendering projects. This last tutorial discussed how to render every sequence in the current project. If you have any questions or ideas about future tutorials, please let me know. Please sign up at www.JETDV.com and subscribe on YouTube to get further notifications on when new videos are presented.